sacrificing some of your sleep. What time is it over there in South Africa right now?
I don't mind. I love doing this. It's like 11 p.m.
Oh, okay. Not too bad. Not too bad.
Okay, cool. So, as you know, the topic that we're going over today is what is the relevance of, Vedic literature in contemporary society. And I think this is a really amazing topic because it kind of just gives the basic whole purpose of Prabhupada's whole mission to America, and just a lot of tips and like to know how to just go about doing that properly going forward. So as you can see in the picture, I highlighted some questions in the poster for the meeting. Wait, let's just see if I can bring it up.
Oh, I
I
didn't see the questions. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so
I have family talking, so I'm gonna myself.
yeah, you can just listen or whatever you're comfortable. If
Can you
you
mute
have
me?
questions, you can ask them later. So here is the poster. Let me just find it. Okay. So yeah, one of the first questions that we asked was, how is our education corrupted in official and public institutions? So this is kind of fun to discuss because people just think education is like the purest thing in the whole planet, like university education is just a pure thing, but actually it's not, because if we look at actual history, like human history, what we know so far, which is also a very narrow perspective, not what we know about history, but most ancient records and scriptures were destroyed and stolen in the Crusades, and some also in the papacy. So some of those records of like books and scriptures and literatures, when the Crusaders were going about colonizing different parts of the world, they actually destroyed a lot of books of knowledge and stole some. Some of them are kept in the papacy. They still have some things there. We don't even know what's there. And this is like not something that only happened by the Crusaders. Just in general, it's happened quite a lot when people have invaded other parts of land and smashed temples and like in war and things like that. The Chinese have destroyed a lot of culture in Asia, of like the Taiwanese and the Buddhists. And we know that they've destroyed a lot of ancient Buddhist temples and literatures, as well as the Muslims going into different parts of India. They also destroyed a lot of things. So even in ancient Africa, a lot of the records and of ancient African tradition were destroyed in Egypt and things like that as well. So or stolen. So there's a lot of history that we don't actually know. We don't have the full picture of. And even our current systems of knowledge are pretty much colonial institutions, in the sense that they were established by a Western perspective and a colonial perspective, and how they're structured, and a lot of what was included and not included in what we learn, in schools and things like that, was very kind of controlled in terms of what the people in power wanted us to know. So that's something we always have to consider. Even in today's like universities and education, many subjects are dovetailed to suit the needs of sponsoring big mogul businesses and global corporations and universities. And Also, our knowledge in universities and schools doesn't really include information on religious and spiritual topics, or how they relate to all of the different areas of knowledge that we do study. And that's kind of a new development. In all of ancient history, all like subjects and schools were mixing material and worldly knowledge with spiritual knowledge. They were like deeply intertwined. I mean, if you think of like the Renaissance and the ancient Greeks and the philosophers there, they didn't really separate what they knew spiritually with what they knew materially, because it all made sense together. So this is kind of a recent development, and it's not really natural. It's just that people have become like that to try and be neutral or whatever. So we're not getting the full picture there. Man, because of us taking out of spiritual knowledge within our normal education systems, man has also been taught to deny or take importantly his spiritual nature. So that kind of feels wrong and unnatural, because it is. In the sense that, we just don't consider it. So it's just normal. What we learn in school and what we do when we get home and university, it just becomes our normal lifestyle. And it's usually that minus spiritual inquiry or spiritual knowledge or spiritual practice. So that's another way that our education is corrupted. People don't practice. People that don't practice what they preach are often engaged in teaching positions and educational positions. People don't care so much about how much of a charismatic teacher or guide you are, as much as how sincere or deep you are in the practice, and if you're a hypocrite or not. So we're not also getting pure knowledge in that sense. It's another kind of form of corruption, and especially quite profound in terms of religion today, which is why a lot of people are rejecting religion, organized religion, because they just don't feel a purity or trustworthiness in it. So we have a lot of false gurus and teachers and guides in religions and in educational institutions who lie and cheat and steal and gamble, and or they're just there for fame. They hold those positions for fame or for primarily for money making. Their primary intention isn't always one that wouldn't corrupt the way that they actually teach or give knowledge. Whereas when we know someone is genuinely fully immersed in a field or has a selfless intention behind their teaching, then they don't usually exploit their positions for enjoyment. So that's kind of lacking. People are also in today's modern world really curious about understanding themselves and spiritual mysteries and things like that, because they're just kind of conditioned into rejecting, traditional spiritual institutions and organized religion. Most Christians and Muslims and those kinds of people that you meet, a lot of them don't have a regular attendance to church or a deep involvement. They're kind of doing it in their own way, and also because of social media, just curious about other things. So, and because of a lot of the hypocrisy involved in these institutions, people are like not really feeling satisfied. They're not trusting organized religion, and they're wanting to see, something where what's lived is actually what's taught and what's done. We want to be the change. We don't want to just talk about it and then everybody is just not doing it when they go home. So yeah, and what people are also finding is that it still doesn't solve their problems of life. Birth, death, old age, disease, suffering, all of these things, all the evil we see in the world. They're not feeling like their spiritual paths are really solving that, or their educational institutions not helping them with their lower nature or what they see in all the society around them. People are also seeking a philosophy that answers all of their questions more factually, because in modernity and contemporary world, we've kind of developed this whole science. Science has become quite a predominant thing. It's almost like a religion on its own. And so people are wanting more factual approaches to things where they can be proven, and, because, sentimentality and all the religious wars and things, people are not, they just don't have faith in it. So the Vedas are really, really relevant actually in modern society or contemporary society, because they are more scientific. The Vedas are, like Prabhupada said, Bhakti Yoga is a science. It's not actually a religious faith. So that is actually helping people, especially when they get into it, to see how easy and realistic Vedic culture is, because it's really practical and applicable and digestible. So yeah, that's also one of the reasons that basically we have like the Vedas are really extensive and they're really satisfying. They cover a lot of areas of life. They cover all sorts of fields, like from, harmonious architecture to understanding the mind and careers and marriage. And it's really extensive. And because it's very factual, people find it very useful. And yeah, so devotees shouldn't really make the application of what we learn and practice in Krishna consciousness or Vedic studies fanatical. We shouldn't be like pushing things in people's faces without factual, practical explanations of things, and like making kind of a cult or like a you're with us or you're not with us kind of mood. That's not really how Vedas are supposed to be taught and understood and applied. Um, yeah. So Western psychology is also something that people are losing faith in, um, to a certain degree. People are more interested in holistic kinds of healing and going into different kinds of shamanism and different religions and psychedelics and things, because they want something that seems more deep. Like Western psychology is very speculative and it's very symptomatic. So it's a lot of guessing and guessing theories, like by Freud and different philosophers and things. And it also leaves out many factors. It's not an all-inclusive field, in the sense that um, the soul and the subtle body and is not really considered. God is not really considered. Um, any perspectives on God are very speculative or confused when it comes to Western philosophy or psychology. Topics on birth, death, and our purpose in life, or why we're here. There's a lot of confusion and variety. There's nothing really solid and conclusive. So the Vedas are also really nice because they give a very, very appreciable, like scientific conclusion that most people, when they read it, they really struggle not to agree with it. So yeah, and Vedic philosophy is also more attractive in modern society or contemporary society because um, it looks at the root cause of our issues, as opposed to just symptomatic or random speculative answers to deep questions that we have that don't permeate through all areas of our life as truth. Whereas the wisdom that we get in the Vedas has that kind of effect. The wisdom in the Vedas is also like it's self-evident. So you can, as you're reading and connecting with it and experiencing it, it presents itself as true. It gives evidence in itself, if that makes any sense. So yeah, that's just a little bit on the topic of how our education is corrupted. Why are people turning to Eastern and alternative wisdom more? We've also kind of discussed that. How can we approach these ancient sources of knowledge, universal knowledge? So how to approach the Vedas? I mean, if you just Google what the Vedas are about, you'll find that there's a Rig Veda, Sama Veda, Yajur Veda. There's like so many Vedas. There's more Vedas than you can read in your whole lifetime. That's how vast the Vedas are. But at least in our Sampradaya, we have a very kind of focused summary in the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is like the creme de la creme, like the essence of the Vedas is summarized in the Srimad Bhagavatam and the essence of bhakti and a lot of the books that we study. So what's the kind of attitude, or how do we get the best out of these literatures? How do we read them? So it's advised that we shouldn't just read it completely and try and understand it completely in isolation by ourselves. You can still gain a lot from doing that. It's not futile. But actually reading it in association of people that have a very spiritually advanced and that have practiced and understood it for a long time is advised, because we can actually get much more understanding out of it in that way. And Yeah, there's also a quote in the Bhagavad Gita. Have you read any parts of the Bhagavad Gita? Have you read the Bhagavad Gita at all?
Yes,
Yeah. Okay,
all
so
of
I
it.
don't know if you. Okay, great. So in chapter 3, there's a verse where Krishna explains that the working senses are superior to dull matter. The mind is higher than the senses. Intelligence is still higher than the mind. And he, or the soul, is even higher than the intelligence. So this is kind of giving a hierarchy of the layers of our being. Um, so the Vedas are the knowledge of the soul. Everything in the Vedas is the knowledge of the soul and the knowledge of God. And therefore it's connecting us with our highest self, the highest aspect of knowledge that we can experience. So everyone in the material world, before they understand the nature of the soul and the nature of God and the nature of the spiritual world, is kind of acting quite generally a lot on a mental platform, and their intelligence is not so refined, and they don't really know what's going on in terms of the soul. So the Vedas are helping us to actually access higher levels of our being and higher levels of knowledge. Um, in the purport of that verse, it also says, if the mind is directly engaged in the service of the Lord constantly, then there's no chance of the senses being engaged in other ways. So the lower propensities of our human nature become less dominant over our being when we're reading and connecting with Vedic knowledge, because it's connecting us more with our soul nature and our higher nature. So it's putting that hierarchy nicely back in order for us to have the soul controlling the body and the sensual experiences, and in a very conscious, and that's Krishna consciousness, when the consciousness, or the God consciousness, is kind of dominating. So yeah, um basically this shows us how Krishna consciousness is like a self-correcting um system of mental discipline, you know the Vedas are basically learning how to cultivate the mind spiritually. So we're learning how to regulate and control and use the mind as a tool, as opposed to being completely under the control of the mind, which is, basically mental energy is not supreme. We need to understand that mental energy is not supreme. And before we really get into contact with the right spiritual knowledge, we're just in this world of speculation and instability, and like that is, it doesn't feel right, because it's not meant to be that everything is dependent on the mind. So when we're looking at systems of knowledge, we need to also assess, at what platform in our being is this knowledge stimulating, and how do we use it. So yeah, the mind has to be controlled. We learn from the Vedas how to contact and stay in connection with the soul primarily. This is our highest intelligence in nature. And through understanding the mind and intelligence, through meditation, through learning to identify the soul qualities and traits, that's how we can use the Vedas to focus on our soul energy and understand our soul energy through these ancient methods recommended in the Vedas. So the Vedas are also giving us a deep insight into the soul. And we need to remember that when we're reading that this is soul wisdom, this is the highest wisdom, and this is connecting us with our higher being. Um, and everything is helping us to understand that. So there's various forms of yoga, there's knowledge of God and the spiritual realm, there's knowledge about our purpose and our function in this world. That's all explained and understood in the Vedas, which is very nice. Um,
I have a question.
yeah.
Okay, so you were mentioning how with like the either re-education, or I forgot the proper word, but let's just call it re-education. You were mentioning how folks are looking to Eastern and Ayurveda and medicine, and more of like homeopathic ways of, or naturopathic ways of healing. Why in Vaishnavism, or particularly in Krishna consciousness, it's frowned upon to take you also mentioned shamanism, to take certain like plant medicines for like either healing or what's the word? You know how there's like ayahuasca, for instance, or
Yeah.
mushroom, or
So
DMT,
basically,
yeah,
one
or
of the
peyote, for instance.
so
Why is it frowned upon?
Prabhupada made ISKCON when he came to New York, and like he kind of was developing how he's going to do this when he was in India. There are other sampradayas, like Prabhupada's guru had a number of disciples. Prabhupada also has a number of godbrothers. Like Narayan Maharaj is one of his godbrothers, and I don't even know all of them. And they also learned Bhakti Yoga from Bhakti Siddhanta. And they also developed their own like Bhakti cult, Bhakti, education and organizations. And Prabhupada specifically in ISKCON gave us the four regulative principles. You know, no intoxication, no meat eating, no illicit sex, no gambling. Because when we cut those things out of our life, it helps us to go and connect with our soul nature more. Because those things, they increase and they aggravate our material consciousness, which makes it much harder for us to connect with our spiritual being and understand spiritual knowledge. Because they're just like they're stimulating the modes of nature in our body to increase. So when we take intoxication, it kind of increases the mode of ignorance. It increases all of the symptoms of the mode of ignorance. So that can actually take us away from our capacity for spiritual life or being steady or maintaining our spiritual life in the long term or even going deeper. It can induce a lot of sleep and irritation and confusion and aggravation and fighting and disagreements and things like that. So it's not really advised that we need to aggravate our mind's stability and our sensual experiences when we're trying to go deeper, like I said, in terms of the levels of, there's the sense, there's matter, there's the senses, the mind is higher than the senses, intelligence is higher than the mind, and soul is the highest. So when we take intoxication, basically our senses tweak out and then our mind is trying to compute what's going on. And sometimes that gives people a deeper perception of like how to connect with the soul because they can feel the physical experience so strongly, but their consciousness, they also feel it separate to this intense, trippy physical experience that they're having. And then they're like, they can feel their consciousness separate. So then they get this idea that, yeah, I'm a soul and this is a spiritual experience that I'm having because they feel the separation of their consciousness to the physical experience that they're having when they're tweaking out. But it's not necessarily a spiritual experience. You know what I mean? So we want to normalize a spiritual consciousness. Bhakti yoga means bringing a spiritual consciousness into everything that we do throughout all of the day. And it does help us to kind of have our mind well reined in, in order to do that so that we can also know when we're having, deep spiritual bhavs in our kirtan or whatever, that's a spiritual experience. It's not coming from some kind of external thing. Some people get dependent, I do want to discuss addiction later in one of our sessions and how that also affects us spiritually and but yeah, that's pretty much the reason that Vaishnavas are not into any form of intoxication in order to understand yourself spiritually. Does that make sense?
No, it totally makes sense. It's just I was just listening to something of like it's one of like prior talks. He's not even alive now, of somebody who was like a DMT mushroom practitioner and how he was able to access other dimensions, like other dimensional beings.
Yeah.
Where like in the Vedic, is there anywhere in the Vedic literature that mentions you reaching other higher dimensions, where you actually see other types of beings that are not,
So in the
not
Vedas,
human?
it's kind of not speculative, and that's the difference between Vedic wisdom and like what's going on in these kinds of fields. Is like all the layers of the spiritual world are described in the Vedas. So there's like all the hellish, the lower planetary systems. There's the Earth Loka, then there's the higher planetary systems going all the way up to Shiva's Loka. Then there's the Brahma Jyoti. So a lot of people have spoken about going into the light. I'm sure you've heard about that before. So the light would be going into the Brahmajyoti, which is like the light that's shining off of Krishna's effulgence. And
Yeah,
then
when people
higher up,
have like near-death experiences, yeah.
yeah, exactly. And then higher up from there, there's like there's the uh there's the Vaikuntha, and then Jamavan and Jambudvip and all these other lokas, and then there's Vrindavan, and then there's Radhakund. So those are, alternate spiritual realms, as well as the fact that the Vedas also describe there being multiple parallel universes. So that's also there in the Vedas, because every time the material creation happens, out of Vishnu's paws, like Vishnu's got this huge body, Garbhodaksha Vishnu is lying in the causal ocean, kind of like in space, and then out of his body, out of every pore in his body, little bubbles come out and each one has a whole entire universe in it. So, like for example, Narada Muni, he was able to travel into different universes, and in each of those universes, they're in a different time. So they might be in a different, like Lord Ram might be currently existing and displaying his pastimes in one parallel universe right now, and Krishna might be somewhere, and somewhere might be at the end of Kali Yuga, and somewhere might be in the beginning of the Golden Age. In those different parallel universes, might be in a different time, and different leelas of the Lord are happening. Buddha might be happening one somewhere. So that's also there. He's joined another sampradaya. It's like something with Janava Mata, who's Lord Nityananda's wife, and another lineage of Bhakti Yoga. Where I think it's more accepted for him to practice Bhakti Yoga with different kind of regulations and principles. So you'll find that in different sampradayas, they might have varieties of principles and regulations in order to take initiation. But in ISKCON, if you take a vow to your guru, you have to follow those regulated principles. And if you don't, then he could physically suffer from you breaking regulations, because he'll take that karma, and it could
Oh,
cause him
wow.
physical pain. So that's why it's very important that once you've actually made a commitment, and you've taken initiation and you've taken your vows, it's very important to keep them. And it's very bad when devotees don't, because their gurus take that karma. And your gurus take in such a compassionate position, so it's not really fair, because it affects their health.
Oh, wow. That's deep.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
So you just have to know. You have to know what your options are, and why these things are there, and make genuine decisions aligned with your heart. Unfortunately, some people in ISKCON are kind of immature, like to the point where they exile people and reject people. And he wasn't allowed to lead kirtans and do so many things when he's grown up in the movement. And it's like it's not like he's a bad person. So I don't agree with that that kind of harsh treatment, especially if he's not afraid to just say that this is a different thing that he's doing and this is his practice, but he's still doing bhakti yoga in a sense. So that's the problem that I kind of have with ISKCON, is the fanaticism, and the you can't sit with us, that when people don't understand things on a deeper level. So, but if you kind of get deep into ISKCON and your vows and stuff, then you should kind of still keep that. So think about it before you make commitments that affect other people, if that makes sense. So should I move on to the next part, or are you still thinking about this? You're on mute.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I have you on headphones, and I have to run out and make errands, but I'm taking you with me.
Okay. All right,
No,
cool.
I think that I want to just, yes, I think you answered it as well as you could. I definitely think that this is a talk that we can expand
Yeah.
another time, when we can go into further detail.
Yeah. Definitely. I'll do some more research.
I think it deserves its I don't know, its 1 hour of talking.
Definitely. I'll do some more research, and I'll speak to some people, and I'll try bring some more information on it to you. because
Awesome.
I
Thank
think
you so
you're not
much.
the first. Also, a lot of people. I mean, I even know some devotees that still smoke marijuana, and they've been doing it for years. It's very hush hush. I know one that's initiated, and he does that, which I don't think is very good
Yeah, I don't
because
agree
you can
with
still
it. And
have a relationship with the guru
I
and be part
recovered.
of
I
ISKCON,
recovered
but
from
just not give you that guru your karma. You know what I mean? If you're not ready to
yeah, I see what you
stick
mean.
to the vows. So, you know, he
I'm
doesn't really believe in the whole illicit sex thing. He doesn't believe in the intoxication thing, but he still took initiation from his guru. So I don't know. But anyway, so we'll just go on a little bit. So another thing about the Vedic literature is that it is a descending system of knowledge. So you get ascending and descending systems of knowledge. So descending means that the Vedas were sang. They were sang originally from God or Krishna himself, and they were passed down orally from one bona fide guru to the disciple, from the next bona fide guru to the disciple, and so on until Vedavyas. So first it was Krishna, and he sang to Brahma, and then Brahma sang to Narada Muni, and the whole Vedas were sung by the Lord. They were sung, and then everything they heard, I mean, the beings in the golden age and those kinds of days, they just had perfect memory, so they could remember everything. They heard it and they understood it, they inquired, and then they repeated it to their disciples. And, you know, that was just going on. And then at one point, Vedavyas, who wrote the Vedas, he's also another incarnation of Krishna. He was like sitting and he was like, you know what? I can foresee that in the future, people are going to become very degraded and they're going to have shorter lifespans, and they're going to be doing a lot more sinful activities, and their memory is also going to be decreased. So he decided to then write down the Vedas, write down all of that wisdom and that knowledge, because he knew that people would need to be able to have a physical reference, you know, if their memory and all of these things were affecting them. So even though we understand that this knowledge is passed down from guru to disciple, we know that this is what Vedavyas wrote down. It's the same knowledge, and you can still access it in that way. So where is this? G. The Vedas were heard by students from the spiritual masters. So that was the process of acquiring knowledge. Hearing. Hearing means receiving the knowledge, not manufacturing it. So that's also a difference between descending and ascending. In descending, we hear the knowledge, we assimilate it, you know, but nothing is made up by us. Whereas in other general systems of knowledge, it's ascending. It's based on speculation and experimentation, and then you accumulate knowledge and you build up knowledge. There's another nice quote by Prabhupada where he explains it quite nicely here. Here. So yeah, you can see Prabhupada says this is not the Vedic process. Vedic process is hearing, ascending process, and not the ascending process, the descending process. There are two processes of knowledges, ascending and descending. Ascending means trying to go high by your strength, and descending means the pure knowledge which comes from up, you receive it. Inductive and deductive process. So ascending process is not recommended in the Vedic process of knowledge. The Vedic way of receiving knowledge is by oral reception, by submissive oral reception from the spiritual master to the student. This is the way it's coming. Okay? So the reason that this is kind of nice is because, hold on, let's just close this. Yeah, basically, we receive knowledge. Okay, I'm gonna come back to that point. Let me just go on to this. So we shouldn't think that the first time we also read the Vedas is also not the way that we can think that we've understood it fully. Because every time we go over certain verses, the knowledge represents itself and deepens, and we learn how to apply it in a more vast and mature kind of way. So there's ability from Vedic knowledge that it's not just plain facts that stay the same. There's an ability to develop vigyan or realized wisdom from Vedic knowledge, which means that the knowledge kind of can mature with us and our experiences in our lifetime, and it can go deeper. We can keep having deeper and deeper revelations and understandings of knowledge. Even when we hear it from more advanced souls, we can gain a deeper understanding of what it really means or how it really applies. So that's another reason that we're advised to hear it from, very advanced and knowledgeable souls, um, in order for, another important thing is that the first time we hear it, because we have a basic understanding of it, we can sometimes apply that knowledge very fanatically, and it can be like, oh my God, some of it we hear and we're trying to understand. So we might like very strictly try to go with that knowledge and kind of be fanatical, we might be very strict in terms of the modes of nature, like I only want to do everything in the mode of goodness. We don't use mature wisdom to understand that, in some circumstances, the mode of passion is required for productivity or to get things done or for creative uh, applications of devotional service. Uh, you know, it's if that kind of makes sense. It's like you might demonize and valorize some things that you read, but later you can understand things deeper. So we have to have a very sort of sensitive approach. We shouldn't apply it externally so much. The Vedas are giving way for a process of self-realization. So we should take what we hear and apply it to ourselves. Take what we read and apply it to ourselves. It's a very self-correcting, self-growing, self-nourishing thing where you're constantly trying to improve and deepen and understand yourself. It's not a system where you're just reading this and pointing fingers at people. It will give you a lot of external realizations and insight into people and situations and things, but we should really apply it in a very self-transformative and self-nourishing kind of way, because um, that will reduce our ability to offend or confuse. We don't know what people are going through internally, really, and their deeper intentions and meditation. So it's kind of dangerous to try and put it on other people. And we should also read the Vedas with a very compassionate perspective. We should understand that, this is a very high way of life. It's knowledge which is coming from God, from the spiritual world, which is for the Brahmanas, which is for the best parts of society. So we should understand that this knowledge is for us to help people, it's for us to be a better part in the world, it's for us to extend our compassion and our caregiving to all parts of society and people in all realms of life, as opposed to using it to judge and feel yourself better than or create separation between you and other people. That is the wrong way to apply, what we learn in the Vedas, to create separatism or to develop a superiority complex. So that is also something we should be very, very careful of when we're reading, assimilating the Vedas into our lives, practicing Vedic culture. Do not use it to put yourself on a platform. Always think about how everything you read and you learn can be understood and applied in terms of compassion. So yeah, that will help us to be very inoffensive. Okay, so yeah, I don't know if you have any questions on that. I want to just go over the last part of this and then wrap it up because it's quite long. No? Okay. Oh, no question. Oh yeah. Did you say you have no questions? Okay,
Can
so
you
I'm gonna
hear
go
me?
on. Yeah, now I can hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
My question was, when you put you put like a slide when it had to do with hearing, when Prabhupada was mentioning about like ascension and want some clarity on that. When you meant on ascension, what do you mean by that?
So basically, if you look at just the way everything is in the world today, people either accumulate knowledge or they receive knowledge. So the Vedas are a system of receiving knowledge. You know, for example, Prabhupada says that a first-class learner is someone who hears something and can assimilate it into their life. A second-class learner is someone who hears something, they're still not sure. They have to watch the example of that knowledge playing out on someone first, and then they understand it. And he says a third-class learner is someone who has to first experience things before they can learn it. So we don't always want to do everything by trial and error. We don't always want to go through experiences when we could just receive knowledge and become wise from that. Like, for example, you could receive knowledge, don't murder. You know, these are the consequences. This is the spiritual. These are the legal. These are the compassionate consequences. It's just not advised. So you might not be sure if that's true. You might witness someone getting murdered and then the suffering caused to the family, and then that person going to jail, and then learn, okay, yeah, I'm never gonna murder. Then that's kind of second class learning, as opposed to just hearing it and understanding it intellectually and believing it. That's first class. Whereas third class would be you hear it, you see other people do it, you still don't get the point. You still don't learn. Only once you experiment, you murder yourself, then you experience all of the consequences and the side effects of that, then you learn the lesson. So, you know, science, for example, is accumulative. It's like we don't know anything about anything, so let's do a bunch of experiments and accumulate knowledge and just build up theories and build up facts and build up a system of knowledge. But it's like taking shots in the dark, you know what I mean? Because it's all just based on what we want to experiment with, where our stance is coming, what we're isolating in that experiment. So accumulating systems of knowledge are less reliable, like science, for example, because theories are constantly changing in science. You know, one year a theory is made, the next year that theory is disproven. And how they're trying to understand atoms and everything, it's very speculative. They're trying to find the God particle, but the Vedas are just saying, understand God, you can find God if you chant, meditate, or whatever. And so by receiving descending knowledge, a lot of people are advancing and getting knowledge and wisdom much faster and more safely and reliably and authentically, because we've received knowledge from practiced, experienced, saintly beings, gods themselves, whatever, as opposed to like just speculating on our small strength of intelligence and our small scope of senses, and you know. So the Vedas are receiving knowledge from a descending system, where you kind of have to trust what you receive bodily and from your spiritual master and a bona fide spiritual authority, as opposed to like trying to build up knowledge just like on your own.
So essentially means you on your own knowledge. Trial and error.
Yeah, it's like it's accumulating knowledge based on speculation. It's I make a system of knowledge. I'm gonna just make my own system of knowledge. You don't research and find out what is already existing based on that. Okay. All right. So yeah, that's a little bit about that. One should inquire submissively while rendering some service to a self-realized soul or bona fide spiritual master. And that's how we can receive descending knowledge in terms of the Vedas. That's actually the best recommended way to receive knowledge, is from submissively inquiring from a spiritual master while rendering service, because a relationship of love is built from that. You know, they love us based on the service that we offer, and then they become very eager to impart knowledge onto us. And these are trustworthy souls who have a lot of experiential wisdom and experience and time and deep understanding of the Shastra and deep purity of consciousness as well. So they can impart knowledge to us in a very clear and trustworthy kind of way. The last important thing that we have to discuss in terms of like taking ancient knowledge, looking at ancient knowledge from a completely different culture, and in a modern and a contemporary society is cultural appropriation. So everybody who's not white knows what cultural appropriation is. And basically, a definition of cultural appropriation is the unacknowledged or inappropriate adoption of the customs, ideas, etc., of one people or society by members of another, typically more dominant people or society. So it's the unacknowledged or inappropriate adoption of the customs, ideas, etc., of one people by a more dominant people. So the reason that cultural appropriation is a problem is because of the power dynamics, you know. So for example, what we had during colonialism was a dominant culture invading, violently invading, and just taking aspects of different cultures very shallowly and very materially and adopting them in ways which were creating offense, which were creating social disturbance, which were not respecting the spiritual values of things. You know, like African masks were just taken and put on display in museums and on the walls in people's houses, when the African people used to believe that these were actually representatives of spiritual beings. They were only used in particular rituals, and they had very particular purposes. They were not meant for decoration. I mean, there were artifacts that were taken out of Africa, put in museums in Europe that cracked the glass. Like they had one voodoo doll that had a bunch of nails in it, and the glass kept cracking every time they had that thing, because this thing had spiritual power and was used for attracting, trapping in bad souls in there and bad energies and demons and stuff. And people just thought it was cool to look at, but it was like affecting a lot of people, the energy of that totem when they came near it, and putting like bad spirits on other people. And so um also, like, we just need to be sensitive of understanding a different culture and not using it in an offensive way. So even with Krishna consciousness, that's very important, how we adopt Vedic culture. Like Srila Prabhupada didn't want, American people to just try and become Indian. He wasn't like, we're bringing Vedic culture and this means you have to become Indian and you have to start wearing Indian clothes and eating Indian food and making Indian jokes and mannerisms and language and talking to each other like Indians, Mataji Prabhu, things like that. That was like not the purpose of what he was doing. So that also is an issue. It's very shallow, and it's not real. So we
So
need to
when did
look at
that change? When did that change? Since
there's always just
Prabhupada,
been, some people are just not mature in the way that, some people are fanatical, they're culty by nature, they don't read and they don't listen. So they also come into the organization and they're attracted by a lot of the material aspects of it, the food, the clothes, the temple environment, but they're not very versed on the philosophy and the knowledge. So they end up just adopting the external culture, and then they confuse it with different aspects of the Indian thing. Some people are just exploring for sense gratification. Some people aren't seeking for a deep spiritual understanding or to realize God or something, and they come across Krishna consciousness. And so they still come with this intention of just like enjoying material enjoyment, and they end up also doing cultural appropriation, inspiring it, propagating it. So it's a very deep thing. It's actually a sensitive topic when we are looking at taking or adopting things out of another culture. We have to do it very sensitively and very intelligently, because it can create a lot of issues. It can create a lot of issues if we don't do that. So, for example, if we're taking, another culture and we're looking at the moral foundation of it to make adjustments for a greater benefit, if our purpose or our intention is not self-centered or for material sense gratification, then we're less likely to do cultural appropriation and create issues and offenses. It needs to be a deeper spiritual need. It needs to be something that we're looking at for the benefit of others, for the benefit of society, or for a deep spiritual, thing. Um, if we're going into a culture and looking at aspects of it, or we're approaching the Vedas and we're looking to exploit it for material benefit, so how can I use this to make material advancements, be better than other people, dominate people in my work field or in the spiritual field, um, or to just, enjoy sensually, just for sense gratification. I like the food, I like the dress, and, that's pretty much the only thing I want to take from it. Then, yeah, a lot of offenses and cultural appropriation can happen. If it's just for enjoyment, I just want to enjoy, that's usually when things go dangerously wrong. So we have this thing of false gurus, and in this age we have a lot of false gurus. We have shamans that are standing as spiritual guides, as healers. We have religionists, like leaders in all religions, that are also creating a lot of havoc by posing as healers and spiritual teachers and so on. But like Prabhupada said, in this age, many unscrupulous men manufacture their own religious faiths, which are not based on any revealed scriptures. And very often, people who are addicted to sense gratification are attracted by such institutions. Consequently, in the name of religion, so many sinful acts are being carried on in that. And the people in general neither have peace of mind nor health of body. So when we do this cultural appropriation, the effect and the purpose of Krishna consciousness is not achieved. We don't develop love of God. We don't develop peace of mind or health of body. I mean, little things can lead to deeper things. In the beginning, we might do a little bit of these things, and then it gets a little bit deeper, and then the benefits come, and the true purpose comes. But it's a problem if it doesn't go deeper. Or, I mean, if we can teach other people, connect to other people in a way which they skipped over that kind of materialistic offensive stage, then that also really helps a lot. So yeah, that's kind of important. Some people, think that they can just become a guru or a teacher just on their own, just because they decided. It doesn't really work like that. And there are also, within the movement, there are many jealous people in the dress of Vaishnavas in this Krishna conscious movement, and they should be completely neglected. This is Prabhupada. There's no need to serve a jealous person who is in the dress of a Vaishnava. So someone who's jealous is someone who's jealous of Krishna. They are there for themselves, not to serve Krishna, not to serve God and become, how to avoid a cultural appropriation. We should, come and serve with sincerity. Like sincerity means genuineness and humility for a greater good, a higher purpose, to please the guru, to become a better person, to develop love of God. And if we hold on to that sincerity and that humility, then we'll also, we'll do things in an intellectual and a smart way, in a more sincere way. Or we should take things up knowingly. So we should understand things, as I always tell you, we should understand things before we just adopt them. Um, and that will also help us to avoid cultural appropriation. And we shouldn't do things for appreciation or honor in society or recognition from others. So we shouldn't have this intention to show it off. And that's the prime reason we're doing it, for an external recognition, as opposed to like really trying to reflect on how God feels about how we're doing things and why we're doing things, the spiritual master, or what the real deep benefit is for us personally. So yeah,
I have a
I
question.
think, yeah.
So it's like cultural, I mean, you mentioned cultural appropriation, but like all throughout Ishtan, the Devi Dasis are encouraged to wear saris, right? Or even if you're not like a Devi Dasi yet, these things are encouraged, like, Indian ways,
Yeah, actually,
Indian
I'm
forms
gonna
of
send you.
addressing.
Yeah, I'm gonna send you a link to one of my favorite gurus. His name's Hridayananda Maharaj, and he speaks a little bit on this topic of. He's known as Krishna West, so he's quite popular because he's like trying to preach in a way that is not culturally appropriated. he's trying to avoid it completely, because Prabhupada was actually also like that. At one point, I heard Ananda Maharaj quote saying that Prabhupada did not at any point say that devotees had to dress Indian. He said they did that by themselves. And then he just tried to accommodate it because they wanted to. And he also said, he wanted people to, in the West, to have an Americanized version of Krishna consciousness that was suitable to the culture and authentic. He didn't want people to just be like external and fake about things, but he wasn't like rejecting it when they did it. Um, so yeah, there's actually no point, according to Hridayananda Maharaj, at which Prabhupada said you have to wear a sari or a dhoti or this. And he also explains in that class how some of the cultural aspects of Krishna consciousness are not all Indian or Hindu. There's a lot of like things which come from Islam and things like that as well, like even some of the dress. So,
Like what?
the temples made the rules. There's nothing in Vedic culture traditionally which says the hair has to be covered, for example. But it's later came in ISKCON rules. If you study the Vaishnava etiquette course, which is supposed to be one of the first courses that everybody does when they come in, is learning just the general manners of what the manners are. They say you should always cover your head. Girls should always have their hair covered when they go in a temple. But that wasn't really originally from Vedic cultures. That's something that comes from Islam. So how that became part of the Vaishnava culture, he was saying in this class, we need to actually know what the history of how this movement developed and what was Bhakti Yoga and Vaishnava culture before it was taken and implanted into the West. And then we'll really understand where people are going fanatical, where cultural appropriation is happening, and what really are we preaching about, and what are we trying to gain from it, as opposed to like just getting swept up by culty people. So I'll send you that class. He's amazing and he speaks on this topic, and he started a whole department in Florida. It's like a whole department on history and whatever, and he's always there with the students, and he works in the university, and he's really, really smart, and he's really, really intellectual and philosophical and really well researched on things, and he has a nice philosophy. So they don't even wear he doesn't wear the devotee attires and things. He just wears Western clothes, based on the things he remembers what Prabhupada said and how he thinks, the movement should be relevant and practical in this modern age. Contemporary, not modern.
But like, how do Indians feel? Do they like welcome it or frown upon it? Like, the dressing.
In
Adopting
general,
Indian dressing.
Indian culture is very, very favorable to foreign people. Like even in India, like everybody in India knows that there's this thing in India that they love treating foreigners like extra, extra special, because they love welcoming people to come and see the culture. The culture is very welcoming and serving. It's not very like exclusive and like get out, It's like they love welcoming guests and serving guests, and that's seen as high culture. That's seen as good character, So Indian people will kind of welcome that. They love seeing white people, with tilak and bindis and dressed Indian. And even the devotees in India are like, Prabhupada didn't want devotee girls he wanted them to be very simple, not to really wear makeup, things like that. Not a lot of jewelry. He said we should really only wear tulsi beads. But you'll see, like in India, the Russian girls, for example, the Russian devotees, they wear like all the Indian, like after a girl gets married in Hindu culture, she gets 16 things that she wears like on her body to show that she's a married woman. And that includes like a black beads of something around the neck, the red thing here, a red bindi, something anklets. The husband also gives a number of saris. there's like all of these things, and that's part of Hindu culture. But you'll see like the Russian devotees are appropriating that into Krishna consciousness, to be like really dressed up and stuff for Harinam Sankirtan, and they wear like this also, that's a thing that wives get, this jewel that sits on the head and goes up here. They wear all these big fat Indian necklaces with their saris and bracelets and tons of makeup and fake eyelashes, and they wear the waist belt on top of the sari and really fancy blingy saris with plastic and tinsel and shit. So the Russians are really into that. That's just their thing, they're very like blingy Indian appropriatey. And some of them are very out there.
I've seen it on
They
YouTube.
don't have good manners. They're so rude to the Indian people and the devotees in the Dham, and they just go there to just enjoy and in the name of Krishna consciousness. So it can be offensive. It can be offensive to a lot of people. It's very careful. We do have compassion as Vaishnavas that everyone's eventually going to advance. Even doing a little bit of devotional service is good. In the long term, some people just take longer to advance and things like that. But we should try to encourage people with love and compassion to become a little bit mature in how they do things by educating them nicely, not correctively or critically. But like, by the way, there's this thing called cultural appropriation. By the way, Prabhupada never said that we had to dress Indian. By the way, things like that, so that people can become a bit mature and understand what is the purpose of this bhakti yoga. What is the purpose actually? And when you're reading the Vedic literature, you'll be so absorbed that you also won't be so into the external aspects of it. You'll be able to walk into the temple and feel the vibes of people, start understanding people's different levels of spiritual advancement. You'll be thinking about your day and your mind. You won't be thinking so much about how everyone's going to see how you're dressed. And, if you can cook like all the Indians that visit the temple cook there, things like that. That's not really the point. So, yeah. There are some other important topics which I didn't go into, and I thought I could leave for later discussions depending on how this goes, if more people come or we want to keep doing this. But I just want to notify you of some of the other topics of discussion in terms of how we understand ancient Vedic literature in contemporary society, which are very important. So one thing is Guru Tattva. I want to have a class where we discuss Guru Tattva. Guru Tattva means understanding the whole thing about what is a guru. How do people choose a guru? Why? And how do they learn from them? And what's the whole culture around that? That's very important in terms of also understanding the Vedic literature, which this system is integral with that. What is the mentality to approach the Vedas with? So what does it mean to approach with a submissive state of mind? Who do we hear from? Is it based on trust or trial? What is the context of understanding Vedic? Like, this is coming out of the Indus Valley region, and what is Vedic culture, and how can we use that in different cultures? Dovetailing, what is dovetailing? Dovetailing means when you don't make a drastic shift, when you kind of take things that you're already doing in your normal life and you just try to make them God conscious. You try to add a layer of spirituality onto normal activities. So that can also be something which is discussed, instead of just renouncing, just dropping everything, moving into the temple, becoming a temple monk, shaving your head, putting on tilak and a dhoti, and just becoming like a Hare Krishna. It's not always advised. Some people are advised to continue with their normal life, but try and spiritualize their consciousness. So there's a difference between, dovetailing, which means using things that you're already doing in your life and spiritualizing them, versus just renunciation, just dropping things, as well as integrating versus imitating. So there's a difference between integrating knowledge and wisdom and culture as opposed to imitating. Imitating is not advised. Imitating is not good. Even if you imitate the things that you read in the literature, you read something about Radharani and the gopis, and you try to imitate it, that's wrong, actually. We're not supposed to imitate Arjun. We're not supposed to imitate Radharani and the gopis and all of that, because we are not them. We're supposed to take principles and consciousness from what they did, but not imitate their external activities. You know what I mean? Because then that's like Prakriti Sahaja. For example, like if you try to do things the gopis did and you haven't completely purified from lust, or you try to act like Krishna, you have it creates problems. There were yogis in Bhaktivinoda's time who were doing these things as well. They were trying to act like Krishna and the gopis, and they were he would get all these young girls and dress them up and have sexual things with them, and it's like that was just from imitation. So it's very much advised to integrate, not imitate. Understand the consciousness, understand how to apply what we read, or don't even touch those higher parts of the literature until you understand it deeply. Okay, so the Vedas also describe how to know what kind of meditation and what is the most relevant and effective kinds of meditation according to time, place, and circumstance. So everybody's into meditation these days. What do the Vedas say on that? The Vedas also describe what is devotional service. So obviously you've heard that a lot. We could also just go deeply into discussing what is devotional service, what is not devotional service. How to avoid, well, we kind of went through that today, avoiding cultiness, fanaticism, separatism, niyamagraha, and appropriation. So that's also something that needs more, why do people get culty? How to stop that? What is separatism? So it's not supposed to be a separatist movement, which says that this culture is different to yours and we're superior and stuff. How to approach the holy name in japa and kirtan meditation. What is Vaishnava etiquette? What are the manners and things? Understanding envy. So that's important. What do the Vedas say on envy? Understanding addictions, according to Vedic wisdom and our modern society. Cultivating self-love. Yukta vairagya, so how to use things in our everyday lives in a spiritual way. And how to take your time in bhakti but get out of this world quick. So how to still, do bhakti yoga at a natural and a healthy pace for yourself, but still make enough progress that you will not keep reincarnating and just stay getting stuck in this world. And additionally, there's also some other people who I've invited to speak, and hopefully they'll be able to come on different topics. So when more people join, or they can bring guests, probably people that like to hear from them, to speak on different aspects of this that also have deeper realization and knowledge to speak on certain topics than me. So yeah, that's pretty much everything. What are your reflections or comments or anything? Or if you're not able to speak right now, that's also okay. If you are speaking, it's on mute.
So sorry. I think you're a wonderful teacher. So thank you so much. I also think you'll be an excellent moderator when you have, when you decide to bring on other, like a panel or something like that. So thank you.
Great. All right. So hopefully it's stuff for you to think about. If anything comes up later, let me know. And yeah, I'll see what we'll do about next week. If it's changing the time, speaking to the other people, seeing why they couldn't attend, if they would prefer a different platform, or what we can do to make it more better. But I hope that it was helpful for you, something. Okay. Enjoy your day, dear Lucy. Love ya. Ending it. Hare Krishna.